So for each one, you should go to the website. For example, edit the codes. How can you do it? Go to the website, go to the API reference. So we are using OpenAI API, right? So this is an API. So in the website, you can check the API reference section and you can see there are different parts: authentication, models, chat, completions. You can see how can you install OpenAI. So for the authorization, you can check how can you set up your API key, okay? And how can you make some requests, okay? Example request and the responses. So for the models, you can check the models documentation. So here we have chat and the completions part. These are very important. So you can see the request body of the chat, the model, the messages, and the role and the content. For the role, there are different role types like system, user, assistant, and the function. So they explained each of them, what is the role, content, name. Here you can see the explanations of the parameters, temperature, top B. So also we have completions. We will use it also, completions. The body of the completions, okay. And also you can check the example Python code. OpenAI, cookbook, examples, and how to format input to ChatGPT models. They shade, so you can use these notebooks, okay. Installation, importing, example, chat API call, you can see. Define the model name. You should give the model. Okay, to get the response from OpenAI, you can use chat completion, right? Chat completion create, and there are some parameters like model name, messages, and temperature. Remember, there are 4 different roles: system, user, assistant, and also function, but you don't need to use assistant and function in the messages. So here you can just give a content for the system, like you are a helpful assistant, then simply you can write knock knock. Okay, so this is chat completion. Then in the response, you will see messages, okay? And in the messages, you can check the assistant and the content. So the response of the assistant is the orange who, because you also give who is there and the orange who. Then you can use this, okay, structure to reach specific target part like the content. Also, there are some tips. You can check their notebooks, okay? So we don't need all of these now. For the edit codes, you can go to the API reference again, and in the here we have edits. So you can see for the create edit, we have again model in the request body, okay, the model name. Also input, so what day of the week is it? So here you can see they have a spelling mistake, right? So the instruction is the fixed spelling mistake. So you can give an input, then with this instruction, it can generate what day of the week, the correct part, spelling, right? The week with 2E is it? So that is very beneficial service from the OpenAI. You can use this editing for different purposes. You can even edit your code. So for example, here we use the same structure. We define a function like code edit, input and instruction here. Why input and instruction? Because in their request body, we have an input and instruction. The instruction is required element and the model is required element. You can also see the required elements or the optional elements, okay? And then you can use the same structure, OpenAI, edit and create, and you need to give some parameters. The model name, so this is required, right? The code DaVinci edit 001. Then you can give your input and the instructions. In this case, we are getting the input and instructions as parameter for this function, and we set a temperature 0. That means no creativity, okay? Just generate the most predictable output, and the top P is 1. That means use all tokens, right? And we will use the same format, same structure. So from the response, go to the choice, the first element, and the text. We don't want to see all of the response. We just want to see the related part. So we are calling code edit function. Input is just empty. And the instruction, to write a function in Python that calculates Fibonacci. So here, as you see, you can even give an empty input to edit it, okay? Or you can give your function as an input, and then as an instruction, you can say that check it and fix it, okay? The response here, you can see the definition, the function, the Fibonacci, and the n, and this you can check this recursive function. As you see, the output is quite successful. Or here in this example, you can give an input, okay, to this input, and then you can say add docstring, okay, as an instruction. So here, after the definition of function, you can see the OpenAI edit and docstring. Or you can rename the function, right? So instead of Fibonacci, you can just use fib, F-I-B. Then again, you need to give the input, okay? And with the code edit function, you can give input, and then for instruction, you can say rename the function. So I think that is enough for the moment. So you can check this part and also the examples, and you can create your own notebook and your own examples. And lastly, I want to show one notebook. So you can use OpenAI for different purposes like classification, chatbots, name entity recognition. In NLP courses, you will see the name entity recognition and the sentiment analysis classification, for example. So with OpenAI, we can also perform the similar tasks. I will pass this part, the installation and the setting key, because we already did it. So here we have an example data sets. So we will implement fine-tuning with OpenAI. The notebook is quite long and I will not cover all, but I just want to show that you can use OpenAI for the classification, for example. So first of all, we need to import the necessary packages, the data analysis and data visualization packages, NumPy, Pandas, Matplotlib, and Seaborn. This is just to ignoring warnings, so not important for the moment. So we are using Google Colab. By the way, I'm just showing the outputs of each cell, okay? I'm not running to use the time efficiently. But when you run this command, so you need to use your Google account and you need to allow to reach the data, okay, in the drive. Then to reach your file, so we have a CSV file, the women's clothing e-commerce reviews.csv. Okay, you need to write the path of the file, the content drive my drive, okay. And we are using pandas read CSV command to load our data and create a data frame, pandas data frame, so df variable. So when we write df.head, you can see the first 5 rows of this data set. And as you see here, we have different features: clothing, ID, age, title, review text, rating. In the NLP course, you will see this data set. Therefore, I will not spend too much time to explain this data set, but basically there are some reviews for the clothing and some ratings from 0 to 5. And recommended IND is binary. 1 means it is recommended, 0 means not recommended, okay? So you can ignore other parts. For example, we can use the Seaborn count plot to see the ratings and the recommended indicator together. So naturally, you can see if the star is 5, if the rating is 5, then the probability of being recommended is too high, right? But if it is 1, the worst rating, then of course the recommended, the 0 should be high and the 1 should be low. I think you got the main idea about the data set. So we will use this text to classify the text by OpenAI, okay? I will skip these parts. Okay, so in the data frame, we have review text and recommended IND columns. So I will just use review text and recommended IND, okay, for the classification. And in OpenAI, I need to create a prompt and completion, okay? So my review text will be the prompt and the recommended IND will be the completion. So why I'm creating this prompt and completion? Because you can check the website, okay, documentation and the fine-tuning. So we are doing fine-tuning, right? We will fine-tune the model to make some classifications. And in these steps, you can see installing, so preparing training data. So as you see here, the GPT needs JSON lines format. Okay, so this is JSON lines format. And in each line, there there should be a one JSON object, and each object should contain prompt and the completion. Okay, so we have review text and recommended IND. So review text will be the prompt text, and the recommended IND will be the completion. So therefore, I'm just using pandas data frame rename. And for these columns, the new names will be the prompt and the completion. Also, I'm using dropna to drop the missing values. Okay. And then I can check the first 5 rows. Okay. The new structure is prompt and the completion. Then, like in the machine learning models, we need to split our data into train and test. So I will use scikit-learn model selection, train test split method. So from data frame, use prompt to create X and completion for the Y. But here there is an important point. So instead of giving 0 and 1, so instead of giving integers, the OpenAI needs some string, okay, for the completion. Therefore, instead of giving 0, we are giving negative, and for the 1, we are giving positive. So these are strings, okay? The completion should be string. Then we can use that X and Y like in machine learning. That is very usual procedure for the machine learning tasks and notebooks like splitting train and test. So we are using X and Y. The test size 0.1 means 10% of the data will be test data and the 90% of the data will be training data. And stratify equals Y means preserve the class distribution in train and test same, right? You can also control the randomness with random state. These are the same and simple steps in the machine learning, right? We just splitted our data. You can check the sizes by using this link. Okay, so we need to prepare our data for the fine tuning. So still it's not ready. So OpenAI wants to get this data as train and test, not X train and Y train, X test and Y test. There are alternative ways. Okay, this is just one way to make it. So we divided our data into X and Y, and then we split it train and test data, but they are X train and Y train. So we need to concate this X train and Y train as train and X test and Y test as test, because the models, GPT models, needs JSON files only as train and test. Okay. So firstly, we just concatenated these data frames. Okay. They are still prompt and completion format, but instead of 1 and 0, we have strings here. Then we need to convert it to a JSON lines format, like in this part. Okay, JSON lines format. So we can directly use to JSON command. Okay, and you need to give a name for the file. So that will be the name of the file, and the file format will be JSON line. And the orient records just the argument ensures that each row of the data frame is a separate JSON object, and lines true. That means writes each JSON object on a separate line. Okay, so to JSON. And for the test, we need to implement same thing. So we will use validation JSON line. And then we can just import JSON and codecs to open the file, to open the JSON file. Okay, so with codecs open, we can give our file. So test file validation file. So mode is read encoding UTF-8. So these are same procedures. And for each line in the file, load the line, okay, by using the JSON and create an object variable, then print it. Okay, I just want to see the first 5 lines. Okay, I don't want to see all, but to see if the format is correct or not. Okay, then I'm increasing this variable a 1 by 1, and if it is 5, then break it. So I just want to see the first 5 lines of my data set. Okay, so here when you run this code, you can see this output. So we have JSON objects in each line, and each line has prompt and also completion, right? And completions are negative and positive, and the prompts are different review text. So we need to use this command line interface. So in the fine tuning part, you can see how you can see the instructions, you can follow them. Okay, how can you prepare the data? How can you fine tune the model? Okay, some instructions and the tactics. So I will not explain all details of this part, but simply you need to use this CLI. Okay, so OpenAI tools and fine-tunes prepare data F, and you need to give your JSON lines. So we prepared these JSON line files, train and validation, right? Then you can use this line, okay, this command to prepare your data, okay? Okay, so here you need to give the name of the model, and remember you can check the fine-tuned model in the output, okay? So sample tweet from the test, okay? Here you can see the test and the first prompt, so we will use it. And we know also the completion, the classification negative, right? The class. And we can use the same structure. Remember this completion create method. We need to give the model and some parameters we can specify. So the model is the model, FT model. We define it here. And the prompt will be the sample tweet, and the maximum number of tokens will be 1. Why? Because the output can be only negative or positive. The 1 token is enough, right? And the temperature is 0. We don't want to have creativity. You can also set the log probability here, and the response, okay, in the response we just need to see the text from the choice, right? So we can use the structure choice 0 text, and the result is negative for this example. So you can write your own sample, your own test. For example, here, if you have money to throw away, you can buy it. It's a bit confusing, right? If you have money to throw away, you can buy it. So when you use the same model, the result is the positive. Actually, it should be negative, right? Because there is an error here. So it's not always perfect. Actually, there are more details, but I will not explain them. So you can use this OpenAI for the chatbot, okay? So you can use name entity recognition. In the bootcamp, you will see these details, but for the moment, I think it's enough. Okay, that is the end of the practical session. I hope it is beneficial for you and helpful, but of course, remember this is just a starting point. So you need to inspect different large language models. You can play with the OpenAI for different purposes. You can even build your application. It's quite fun and efficient, okay? And instead of using just ChatGPT, you can use this OpenAI API, and you can configure the parameters, you can increase the temperature, etc. Or you can fine-tune your own model for specific task, right? Okay, I hope you liked the class. That is the end of this video series. It was a demonstration from our NLP session. We just see the theoretical part of the large language models. What is GPT? We saw a couple of comparative studies, and we checked the website, the API documentation, and we used some example structures to build our own applications. And we implemented SQL Translate. We classified the review text about the e-commerce clothings, and we fine-tuned a model to make a classification using the reviews about the clothes in the e-commerce website. So thank you very much for the attention. If you have any question, you can write your comment, or you can directly send your questions. In the bootcamp, you will have multiple channels to ask your questions. You can use Slack, or you can directly ask your questions during the class, of course. See you in the other videos.